Sorry, I can't hear anybody.
No, neither can I doing the live stream. There's no sound.
Not me.
I haven't started streaming yet, so you might want to try and do something in the booth.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah,
If you can
fine.
start the
Yeah.
meeting again, and then I can do the stream if that's okay. Lovely.
Yeah, we'll start again. Okay. There we go then. All right, we'll restart this meeting then. Welcome all again to the Planning Committee. The first item on our agenda was apologies for absence. I know we had two there, didn't we?
Yeah, from Councillors Alan Jeffrey and Sarah Keaton, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And then item 2, any disclosures of personal interests or prejudicial interests? Are there? No? You. Item 3 is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting as a true record, starting at page 1, page 2, page 3. Then we go on to page 4, 5, page 6, 7, and 8. And then there was one on the 18th of May. So somebody would then approve those as a true record, please.
Just one thing, Chair. I thought you would have noticed this, that on page 9, you were not down as present. And yet you took the chair, so the magic there.
Oh, you're all right. Well spotted. Right. With that correction, does somebody move them as a true record then? Thank you. All right. Item 4, any items for deferral or withdrawal?
No, Chair.
No. Thank you. Right. And then we move on to item 5, determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990. And we've agreed that we will do item 2 first, which is you'll find on page 49 is at the waterfront. And it's Dave. Thank you.
Presentation, yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair. No updates to this item. I do believe you've had members have been circulated directly from the agent, some further information with coastal and some visual information as well, which hopefully is of benefit to you. So plot B3, Swansea SA1 waterfront. So it's obviously a prominent site there on the River Towie, obviously edged in red. You can see obviously the boats, marina, the sail bridge, and it's obviously opposite Ice House, which is a listed building, J Shed, which is the listed building, and Ultima residential building, and the pump house and the commercial building to the south as well. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, Ian, please. It's just I'm not sure we can read that. Similar type of ignore that similar image. Obviously, it just gives a bit of annotation in terms of site context for the surrounding buildings. And if you go on to the next slide, Ian, please. And there we go. So there's a aerial image, site edge in red, and you can see the context with, as I said, J Shed, Ultima, commercial building, and Ice House, sail bridge, etc., overlooking the site. So it's a development site in SA1. It has been granted planning history previously. In 2006, that permission was actually implemented, and we'll go on to show that in a minute. So this actual application, outline application, residential development with some commercial element to the Ice House Square. So outline all all our details reserved for reserved matters approval, but obviously it's been submitted in support with lots of illustrative drawings, parameter plans, and some CGIs, which we will present to you in a little bit. So whilst this outline, residential has up to a maximum 104 dwellings, commercial unit overlooking ISO Square with an undercroft basement car parking up to 93 car parking spaces. So if you next slide, Ian, please. And there we go. So you can see it's a hoarded site, brownfield site in SE1. You can see the hoarding, obviously, and its proximity to the Riverside Walkway. And then you've got the ice house and the J Shed red brick buildings in the background. And the next slide, Ian, please. So this is the approved 2006 permission, which was, I think, was 91 units. Again, it had a commercial element facing onto ISO Square, and it ranged, as you see, between 4 stories to a maximum of 11 stories towards the south. So that development was actually commenced in 2008 when they did some piling works, and so that's a live extant planning permission which could be implemented, but obviously it's not currently proposed to do so. But obviously the existing permission obviously is a material planning consideration, and obviously it further emphasizes the development value and principle of development on the site. And obviously the site, as I say, it's within SA1, it is allocated on the master plan as a residential site with some commercial elements in accordance with what's been submitted. And it does, so the guidelines for parameters within the master plan obviously show residential land use with a development up to 11 stories. So it's obviously compliant to the overall outline master plan permission. So in terms of, so yeah, if you go to the next slide, Ian, please, and it just shows, yeah, this shows the footprint of the approved layout. Okay, so and the next slide, please, Ian. So again, so as I say, it's supported by illustrative drawings as an outline scheme. So that is the illustrative layout for the ground floor. So the blue element is the commercial cafe use, which will face onto ISO Square. And then obviously the yellow blocks indicate residential or ground floor. The green areas are the podium private landscaped areas, which will be elevated above the walkway just to give it a strong podium public-private definition from the walkway. And the basement is to the south of the site, the access to the basement rather to the south of the site. And then the next slide, that's, yeah, so that one is the parameter drawing. And obviously what that shows is the maximum height which the development will be allowed to go to. And obviously based on the illustrative layouts, the maximum footprints, it's estimated that the development will accommodate a maximum of 104 dwellings. And the next one, Ian, is, yeah, so that's an illustrative elevation drawing, and we'll go on to the CGIs in a moment. So as I say, it's in SA1. The principal development is firmly established by local plan policy. It's in the strategic development area, and obviously it's an allocated site for residential development, and also its provision of 104 coastal housing association affordable housing units would be in accordance with development plan policy and are welcomed in this location. And obviously there's a general outstanding demand over and above supply of affordable housing. So if we move on to the placemaking aspects of it, obviously it's been assessed in detail within the report. We've assessed it against our residential SPG, and it shows how the scheme has evolved against key placemaking objectives. And also that's outlined in detail in the report by under our council's placemaking and heritage officer. So as outlined, the site is in a sustainable location within SA1. Lots of local facilities within walking distance. Obviously, we've got the promenade, Sailbridge access, and it's close to public transport and city centre within walking distance as well. So it's got an urban density which is welcomed at this dockside regeneration location, and the proposed scale is in accordance with the master plan. So if we go on to one of the CGIs, Ian, please. There we go. So this is a computer-generated image of what the development should look like, subject to reserve matters approval. Obviously, this is in accordance with this illustrative and parameter plan submitted with the application. So in townscape terms, obviously, it's 4 stories rising to 6 stories in the middle of the site. So obviously, it gives a bit of interest at roof level, so it's not a uniform development. Obviously, it tends to try and break up the mass of the building. So as I say, the extant permission is for the development up to 11 stories. So obviously, that's an important consideration. So the elevations would incorporate strong, robust brick finishes referencing the listed buildings of Ice House and the J Shed. So obviously, it's been designed accordingly to be appropriate to its context. And then you've obviously got the gable references, obviously typical dockside architecture mirroring sort of warehouse development you typically find in a dockside location. So in key placemaking terms, obviously, the scheme is supported and welcomed. As I say, heritage is addressed within the report. There are, as I say, it's got a number of interests, heritage assets within the site that are adjacent to the site in terms of, as a setting of the J Shed and the Ice House, which is also listed, and also the Maritime Quarter Conservation, which is on the opposite side of the road Towie. So that's been assessed in detail, and obviously it's the scale of development and finishes, etc., are deemed to be appropriate. So if we move on to the highways issues, this has been assessed by the transport assessment, and obviously it's in terms of traffic generation is deemed to be compliant to the existing road network. So if we go back on, sort of move on to one of the other images, please, Ian. Sorry, for the next one. Sorry, next one. No, sorry. Okay, sorry. We'll go back. Sorry. Can we go back? Yeah. Sorry. There is an image, sorry, of the lay-by, which we haven't got on the presentation, which is on Kings Road, basically, which allows for refuse and delivery collections. Concerns were expressed by our highways officer previously, but it's been designed in accordance. It will be subject to a gramping condition to try and control the detail and to amend the existing TRO, which is in the area. So that will all be catered for. As I say, basement parking, 93 spaces for 104 residential. So it doesn't provide 100% coverage. It provides something like 90% coverage. But as I say, this is in a sustainable location within walking distance, and obviously to maximize the urban density, which is appropriate to SA1, then the car parking provision is deemed to be appropriate. As I say, this would be in accordance with the development plan, Future Wales, and Planning Policy Wales guidance on car parking, which is outlined in the report. And obviously, that's to minimise car parking in sustainable locations. So it's in accordance with development plan policy. The site is adjacent to River Towie, obviously, and the flood risk has been assessed by the flood consequences assessment, and is deemed to be compliant to the existing version of TAN 50 Technical Advice Note on Development and Flood Risk. And the development has been designed accordingly, and it's obviously got a finished floor level which is appropriate to the flood risk, and it's compliant in that respect. Contamination, there has been reference to contamination. Local development plan policy constraints map identified the site of historic contamination with the past industrial use of the docks, obviously, but that's been subject of lots of studies, and is not deemed to be a current risk subject to particular site investigations on this particular plot. So in conclusion, Chair, this is a allocated site within the SA1 development for residential development. It accords with the master plan guidance for land use and scale, and it provides an important provision for affordable housing. As I say, if we skip to the CGIs, Ian, there we go. So that's what we'll be looking at, subject to detailed approval. And I think that is it the last, yeah, that's the last one, I think, isn't it? Yeah, so that shows obviously the site in context, and you can see obviously the relationship to the ice house, J shed, and the Ultima building to the rear of it. So obviously it's a strong gable frontage, dockside architecture, which obviously is deemed to be appropriate for this location. So it's supported in placemaking terms, and so it's compliant development plan. So it's approved, subject, recommended for approval, subject to 106 to cover, control the section, affordable housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And again, Mr. Baxter, you wanted to address the committee with your 5 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee, for the opportunity to address you today in relation to this application for the construction of residential development and associated parking and landscaping at Site B3 at Swansea waterfront. This outline application has been thoroughly examined in relation to the development proposed, resulting in no objection from any of the statutory consultees and a positive recommendation from your professional officers. The officer's report is transparent, balanced, and well informed, providing a reasoned justification as to why the application is considered acceptable. Notwithstanding this, the applicant is fully aware that there are concerns expressed by the local member and local resident. The officer's report has sought to address each of these issues in detail and confirms that the application site benefits from an extant historic planning permission for a much larger scheme in terms of scale. Notwithstanding this, I'll take the opportunity to reinforce the fact that we consider the application accords with the spirit of both national and local planning policy, and that there are no other material planning considerations which indicate the application is unacceptable. It's considered that the key technical areas which are fundamental importance to the determination of the application are dealt with in the officer's report. I would reiterate that no statutory consultees, including the Council's own Highways Department, have raised any objection to the application. With respect to car parking provision, members will note the observations of the Council's Highways Department, whom acknowledge that the site lies in an inherently sustainable location and raise no objection to the 90% on-site provision. And together with the provision of a car parking management plan and car share scheme to restrict car ownership and encourage residents and visitors to utilise other sustainable modes of travel. It's noted in the appraisal section that third-party objectors raise issues with the principle of affordable housing at the site, seemingly to have made reference to information relating to another application. The Council's housing section have referred to the most recent local housing market assessment, which identifies a high need for affordable housing across Swansea and the central strategic housing policy zone, the waterfront ward where the site lies. They confirm that the scheme to be occupied by coastal housing is for 100% affordable housing, with the proposed mix and tenure acceptable to meet their housing need. A letter from Coastal Housing has been circulated to members to confirm this. In terms of surface water disposal, a SAB pre-application was sent on the 2nd of February. At this juncture, Apex Consulting Engineers have now submitted a full SAB application and are in proactive dialogue with the Council's drainage team in terms of technical design matters. In terms of flood risk, NRW is satisfied that the technical note provided by JBA Consulting demonstrates that the tidal risk at the proposed development and along the access route is appropriate and can be managed to be safe for all site users now and in the future. The technical information submitted to accompany the application has been subject to detailed scrutiny and addresses all comments of the technical consultees who raised no objection to the scheme. Section 38 of the Act requires decisions to be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. It's considered that the proposed application accords with the development plan as your officers have laid out, and there are no other material considerations which negatively outweigh this, and on balance, the application is considered to be acceptable. Given the above and the fact that the development does not cause any demonstrable harm to matters of acknowledged importance, I respectfully request that committee endorses the officer's report and resolve to approve the application subject to the conditions imposed. I thank you for your time and your patience.
Indeed, thank you very much. Any member wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, on the affordable housing, I know we're asking for 10%. That seems to me quite low. I mean, obviously, this is a housing association, so I'd expect it to be more than that. But I'm just wondering why why I'm not going for 15 or 20%, which seems to me to be much more relevant. And certainly, you know, we should be looking for that. But that's obviously there's a reason behind that, so I'll see what that is. My concern is in the parking. I mean, I just looked at the parking standards documents not so long ago, and I understand you need one parking space for every bedroom, plus one for every 5 units, which effectively means this development needs over 200 parking spaces, and we're getting less than half of that. Now, I understand all the issues about, you know, being based in somewhere you can walk, but of course, people live in these places. They don't just walk locally. They drive to visit relatives. They have cars because they go on holiday and such that. So, I mean, that doesn't actually, just because it's in walking distance of facilities, doesn't automatically restrict car usage in there. So, given as I understand it, and is it King's Road, isn't it? Is a Welsh government's own road where they will not allow parking at all. The question is, where are all the cars going to go? Because, you know, parking in the marina area is very difficult as it is. There's just open part of the multi-storey car park there, but there is very little parking for residents. There's very little disabled parking on them in that area as well. So it just seems to me that we're just adding to the problems of the area in terms of the parking congestion by not insisting that there is enough parking spaces to cover the units. Even you know, we're looking at 150 as opposed to 91, but it just seems to me that this is going to cause problems in the future.
Thank you. Okay. Any member? Oh, Councillor White, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question, Highways Officer. On page 66, in regards to the 6 points set out there, have these 6 issues been fully addressed? And are you satisfied that it's workable? And can I perhaps a follow-up question, Chair, in regards to page 77? In the request for additional information and amendments required, can I ask if all the above information has been received? There's 14 points there, Chair, for additional information and amendments. Can I just ask if they have been received as well?
Yep. No, more or less not. Just a couple of points.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, with regards, Councillor Black's first point about parking, obviously, in terms of, sorry, the first point about affordable housing, sorry. So, yeah, so within the SA1 development, generally speaking, we've made the recent developments be subject to 106 to 10% affordable housing. So that's in accordance with the SA1 outline permission, which is granted back in 2001, has been renewed effectively. But that originally sought to provide 10% affordable housing across SA1. So that's where the 10% has come from. In reality, so that makes it a planning compliance scheme, if you like, in that respect. But obviously, the reality is that in this case, we do have a provider, which will be Coastal Housing, so they will actually provide much more than that, obviously. But that's the reason for the 10% effectively, because it's consistent then across the board. So we make all the new developments be 10% compliant, whether it's an RSL or a private developer effectively. So we see parking, yes, so we haven't got, well, I haven't got 200% provision if you apply the car parking guidelines. So we've got 104 units, 93 car parking spaces. So yes, it doesn't conform to the car parking guidelines which we apply, but obviously, as I say, as I've outlined in the report, we've tried to within SA1 achieve a far greater density, because obviously, if you apply, if a development was restricted by car parking, then we wouldn't achieve the density we want to achieve. So obviously, if it was only 93 spaces, then maybe we could only fit possibly 50 units on the site, which would result in a different type of development than was proposed, and which is we've achieved on other plots as well in SA1. So there is a general placemaking consensus across SA1 where we would try to achieve higher density as possible, and that has meant that car parking standards have been below what we would normally achieve. So obviously they are restricted. We do, in this case, we do have a single management. Coastal will take on the development, so they will be looking to manage the development, so that they will obviously look to manage the car parking spaces, and they will only allocate car parking spaces to people who should. I mean, hopefully there'll be tenants going in here who won't want a car parking space, and that's what the scheme should be managed, because, and the scheme should sustain itself because it's close. There are alternative facilities to car parking. Having said that, obviously, so it is on King's Road, as you say. It's currently, well, I think it's actually managed by the council now. I think it's in the process of, in terms of adoption, going through the process, which the council will take over. We will, I think we may actually be involved in the car parking management enforcement along King's Road and Langdon Road, which are obviously subject to yellow lines restrictions, and which generally, in my opinion, control car parking within SA1. And whilst parking is restricted on plots, that doesn't result in car park congestion across SA1. I think my general view is that if you drive along King's Road and Langdon Road, you very rarely see a car parked on yellow lines, because parking enforcement is strict. So therefore, it doesn't become a highway safety issue. So in that respect, I think we're quite satisfied that obviously the parking is satisfactory. Councillor White asked several questions on first of all on highways, which I'll bring Matt in a minute. You also asked a question on page 77, which is the placemaking response. So obviously that's the initial response from a placemaking officer to the initial scheme. During the consideration of the application, the scheme was amended. And then if you turn over the page to the final placemaking comments, then all those issues have been addressed. And so therefore, the placemaking officer is happy with the scheme which is before you today. So page 66, which is the highways comments. Again, these were comments in response to the initial submission. And again, below that are the final comments. So I'll bring in Matt, the highways officer at this point, just to elaborate.
Thanks, Dave. Yes, so the initial 6 comments were comments to the initial submission. I mean, part of the reason for the reduction in the number of parking spaces is that the issues with the space size was addressed in a subsequent submission. Obviously, if we insist that the parking spaces themselves are made a little bit bigger, then that will affect the overall numbers. In terms of the quantum of parking, I think it is well recognised that over provision of parking will generally encourage people to buy and own cars, and in this case, as the building is going to be managed by Coastal, and we've conditioned a car park management plan, that the storage of cars on the site can be adequately managed. There's very limited opportunity around the rest of SA1 for indiscriminate parking. It's not sufficient for us to object on the basis of lack of parking. We'd have to demonstrate that there's a highway safety issue associated with that, and given the parking controls in SA1, I don't see that we can object on that basis. Councillor White raised the 6 points in the initial comments, and yes, all 6 points were addressed in subsequent submissions, and that should be reflected in the latter stage of the report.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Black, then Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In fact, on page that page, it actually states that King's Road is not an adopted highway, and that obviously, although we may enforce the parking on behalf of the Welsh Government, but my point is that is King's Road, you cannot park on it, and the enforcement is very strict. So anyone who lives in that development who cannot get a space but has a car has nowhere to put it, and that's my point. Is it just adds to the congestion, and in fact, I think there's very limited. I think as Matt has just said, very limited alternative parking spaces elsewhere in SA1. So I'm just concerned that in terms of managing this, that there is not enough parking spaces being provided to cover this development. That's just my concern.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point, in his opening comments, the planning officer said that this planning permission was given on this site in 2006 for obviously a different development than we're looking at now, but I understand that that's still live. Could the officer enlighten me to how many parking spaces were included in that planning permission in 2006?
Yeah, in response to that query, Councillor Lewis, the approved scheme had 91 units and 93 car parking spaces. And just going back towards what Councillor Black was saying, what I would say is, yes, parking is constrained in the site, but I would also make the point that there is visitor car parking available in SA1. There are public car parks available. I know some of them are on temporary development sites. That will change in the near future. There has been a couple of planning permissions granted to Welsh Government to provide permanent surface car parking. So there are alternatives apart from on-plot parking as well.
Right, thank you, David. Right, I got no other hands up to speak. Oh, sorry, Matt, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify for Councillor Black, quite right. The Kings Road is not adopted yet. It is under what's called a Section 38 agreement, so the adoption is in process, although it hasn't happened yet. Although we do enforce the yellow line parking on the roads.
Thank you, Matt. Okay then, no other member wish to speak. Well, you can see, members, the recommendation there is to approve. So we'll take that vote now then. Thank you, Gareth.
Councillor Peter Black.
Abstain.
Bill Downing.
For.
Mary Jones.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis.
I'm saying, Chairman, because I came in late.
Okay.
And although I think the development and the architect in particular is known to me very well. I'm sure that my colleagues will go to the right way and put this development to go ahead.
Councillor Nicola Matthews.
Right.
For.
Mark Tribe. Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
Paul Lloyd.
For.
8 for 2 abstentions, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, that's carried. And then thank you for that. And we go back to item 1 then, which you find on page 13, and that's the Tay John site with the solar farm application. And this was again, Dave. Thank you.
My gun. Right, so T John solar farm. So obviously we're all familiar where T John is at the eastern end of Porten and St Thomas residential community. So there we can see the red line, which is obviously the application site on T John. So it's not all of T John. It covers the southern portion, which is immediately to the rear of the existing recycling. So the blue line is obviously other land in our ownership, and in this instance represents the access into the site basically. And the wiggly red line, which you can see then obviously is again the access road, and it also covers the connection point for the electricity, which basically goes underneath Fabian Way and is meant to connect to the sewage works on the southern side of Fabian Way, Welsh Water's sewer site. So yeah, so the application is for solar farm, 3 megawatts, covers approximately 11 hectares of T John. It basically is the capped area of T John. I think so. It's about a third of the existent of T John. The remaining of the site, I'm pretty sure we've stopped dumping black bag waste in there, but I think there is still remediation works ongoing to cap it and obviously induce course, landscape it and grass it, etc. So I think the information we have is that this part of the site ceased operating in 2015 and was capped between 2016 and 2018. Go to the next slide, Ian, please. So there we go. There was obviously an aerial. So you can see this in the south, the recycling part of the site. And you can see obviously this is where you can, well, it's obviously the grassed area, and then the land to the northeast obviously is the land which is still undergoing treatment works. And then you can obviously see the access roads which are across the site, and the existing access road which is to the south of the development as well, which obviously serve the proposed T. John solar farm in terms of its construction as well. So there'll be no new access tracks going into the site, utilising existing infrastructure. So development 5,500 solar panels, and as I say, it also involves the private wire connection, which will export the electricity to Swansea Waste Treatment Works crossing underneath Fabian Way, which I think goes underneath an existing railway bridge. I think goes over Fabian Way. So if you go to the next slide, Ian, please. So again, so we can see the basic layout of the solar farm. You can see the purple, which is the proposed construction compound to the south, adjacent to the recycling depot. And then you can see obviously the blue lines represent the solar panels going across the site. The ponds basically represent existing surface water attenuation. So obviously that's excluded from the development area for the solar farm. And the next one as well, Ian, please. I think that just shows some more detail. So you probably can't read that writing, but basically it shows the green, which is obviously the existing access to the site, the yellow, which is the public access to the recycling depot. You've got the existing access tracks across the site. And then obviously the purple is the continuation of the access, which basically goes to the remaining portion of the landfill site. And then the next one, Ian, again, obviously it's a typical solar panel mounting, which obviously is low to the ground. So it obviously is tilted to maximize the solar efficiency and capture. And it tilts up to a maximum, I think it's 3 meters in height. Okay, so in terms of the scheme itself, so obviously principal development there's a strong political support, and in terms of this is a council application, so obviously the council have got aspirations to be net zero, so obviously it'll be a contribution towards that. And obviously there's also strong planning policy guidance in terms of support for renewable energy, both through planning policy Wales and Future Wales National Plan Policy 17, which obviously encourages renewable energy, and to meet the Welsh Government's commitment to try and generate 70% renewable energy by 2030 as well. So obviously all the policies, planning policy Wales guidance is within the report. In terms of Swansea local plan, there is a policy EU1, which supports renewable low carbon energy developments. And in particular with solar farms, it identifies so-called search areas, which are predominantly in the north of the city, around sort of Vindra, Ponte de Las area. So it's outside that. And also the policy is mainly directed at solar farms with between 5 and 50 megawatts. Obviously, there's a 3 megawatts, so it's slightly below that threshold. Nonetheless, the policy is generally applicable in terms of criteria for assessing the projects. So as I say, there's widespread political and policy support for renewable energy, both at national and local level. So as I say, the site is capped, is the grassed over element of it. So in addition to the solar panels, there will be 2 substations, one near the site, and there's another one on the opposite side near the wastewater treatment works. Construction is approximately going to take about 6 weeks, and obviously the operational life of the solar farm is approximately 40 years before it's decommissioned, or prior to that, possibly renewed with a much bigger scheme or new solar panels, whichever comes sooner. So the site will be enclosed. There'll be security fencing and CCTV around the perimeter, and obviously there is quite a strong landscaping proposal as well. On the next slide, please. There we go. So that's the existing site. So as you can see, it's basically grassed over. You can see the bottom right picture effectively is the recycling plant, and the one in the bottom left, you can see the attenuation feature, which is excluded outside the site. On the next slide, Ian, again, that shows the existing access tracks across the site. Okay, so the next slide attempts to show the visual impacts, and obviously you can't probably see a lot of detail from those images. But obviously it's been assessed, it's been accompanied with a landscape visual impact assessment in support of the application, and obviously that's identified two main issues: landscape character and visual amenity, to assess the proposal. And obviously it identifies what's referred to as a zone of theoretical visibility, with identifying a 2-kilometer radius of the site, basically, and identifies a number of viewpoints to where you can potentially see the site effectively. Conclusion, obviously, of the LVA is that whilst there will be some visibility across the wide area, it doesn't have regard to existing vegetation, topography, etc. And the low-lying aspect of solar panels, then it's not considered to be a detrimental impact in terms of landscape and visual impact. So in terms of residential amenity, the nearest property is obviously 300-400 meters away in Port Tennant. So some distance away. There's obviously, you'll note there's no considerable objections to the scheme. In fact, there's very little representation whatsoever. So obviously it hasn't generated a lot of public interest, which I think probably dictates that it's not going to have a significant impact on terms of the local area, in terms of visual impact, or during construction, which, as I say, will be short. And obviously, having regard to the existing traffic generation from the landfill site, then those impacts will be short term anyway. There is a glint and glare assessment has been included with the application, which is to have regard to solar reflections. And again, the impact is concluded to be minimal. Again, I think the design of solar panels these days is designed to mitigate the impact against glare anyway. Noise disturbance is, as I say, it's unlikely. There might be some disturbance during construction, but as I say, this will be temporary. Ecological impact, there are a sensitive ecological site to the east of the site, which is Crumlin Bog. Crumlin Bog is a special area of conservation and a Ramsar site, and it's also as an SSSI as well. So obviously a sensitive site, but obviously in terms of the particular impacts of this development, then again, the impacts are considered to be minimal. And there are quite considerable conditions in terms of mitigation, in terms of landscape management plans, construction management plans, lighting strategies, invasive species, and ecological enhancement as well. So I'd say in terms of highways, there's not considered to be any detrimental impact in terms of highway safety. The access to the site during construction will utilise the existing access to the T. John landfill site. Drainage, landfill, flood risk has been assessed. There's no impact. Obviously, historically, it's been used as a landfill site, so obviously contamination is an issue. But as I say, this is a site which has been capped and grassed, and obviously by the nature of the solar panels, which obviously won't disturb the ground to a large extent, then obviously that impact is considered to be acceptable. So in summary, Chair, this is a renewable energy project. There's widespread planning policy commitment, support and the principle of development, both in Future Wales and Planning Policy Wales, local development plan. And obviously it goes some way for Wales to achieve 70% renewable energy by 2030, and also the council's aspirations to be net zero. Obviously it's been assessed against landscape, visual amenity, neighbouring properties, and obviously all those issues have been considered to be acceptable and mitigated against. And therefore the project is supported and recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much again, David. Councillor Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very happy with this. Just one question about on page 38. I mean, as I understand it, this is a former landfill site which has basically been filled and landscaped on top. So I'm interested in the high risk of unexploded ordnance, which is referred to. Where are we likely to find that, given that this has already been dug up once and re-landscaped?
Interestingly, alongside in the Ramsar site and the Crumlin Bog site, there are still the anchors for barrage balloons.
I can believe it.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, will there be particular provisions being put in place to ensure that we don't actually blow ourselves up while we're putting these in?
Yeah, just a query, Page. Chair, in regards to there's no because of what's been there for many years, and the people of the community having to put up with over there. Is there any sort of possibility of giving some support to the community trust in the way of a 106? Just thought it was, Chair. You know that if they're going to get money from on the solar panels out there, to process, give something back to the local community.
I understand it has been discussed elsewhere for a community benefit, doesn't it? Trying to think where, but not in this document. No, sorry. Anything else, Mike?
The funny thing is, I was going to ask exactly the same: is what are benefits to the local community with this? The other thing is, when these are going, we've got, what do you say, 5,000. So where does all that go? It said it's going to cross now to where? Where is it? Yeah. So where does that power go to? It doesn't go to the local people. This is just for that and the use of the council. So what's the benefit?
It goes to the main grid.
Yeah. So what where is the benefit here? Does this mean it's going to somewhere that the council runs, so they don't get it from using electricity? So they make it.
Water site, I believe.
So who's getting the money from this?
Yeah. Councillor, you come back with that now. Anyone else? No. Oh, Councillor Troy.
Sorry, Chair, I've been indicating as well. I don't think you've seen
All
me.
right. Beg your pardon. Mark. You might come back and then we come back to Councillor Jones. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's too complicated for me. I just wondered if there been any surveys completed on the effect of or the impact on biodiversity or the wildlife issues. I apologize if I missed that. I just wondered if there'd been any surveys completed to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, my question's similar to Councillor Downing, but can we have the slide that showed where the actual power is coming out? Because the water treatment works is almost up by Baldwin's Bridge, which is on the border, as we know, between East Portalbot and ourselves. And yet the access road into Tir John is opposite McDonald's. And when you looked at the first slide, it actually looked as if it was coming out there. So I was a bit confused as where it was coming out. So if somebody could tell me that, because the houses we can see, and I'm sure Councillor Lloyd, you know the area probably a lot better than I do. The only thing I did was plant trees around the playing field when I was Lord Mayor. But it does seem as if it's down too low to go to the treatment work. So I'm wondering, how this works, because that doesn't look, I mean, I can see where you say there. So it's coming underneath the road all the way up and then across just by Baldwin's Bridge, I take it. So perhaps somebody can reassure me that it's not going all the way along Fabian Way and we're going to have a load of hold-ups while they're doing it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll come back with that now then. Anyone else? No? Okay, few things.
Regards, yes, obviously, Councillor Black's point about the ordnance. I think, yes, obviously it is a landfill site, and you'd have thought that any ordnance would have been discovered a long time ago. I think that's been picked up in the desktop study. Now, I think so. It's been identified as a potential risk, if you like, but I think in reality that yeah, mostly on this cap site, you'd have thought that if there was anything, it's already been discovered and discarded. You'd have thought. Having said that, there are conditions on the recommendation for a more detailed investigative study to be undertaken. So that's one of the issues which that will pick up effectively. So I think there's also widespread questions about community benefits. So obviously, as I say, this is a council application. There was a specific question about 106. So yes, obviously, as a council application, we can't impose a section 106. But in terms of the general benefits of community benefits, obviously there's a benefit. Whilst there might not be a direct benefit to the local residents per se, obviously it's been it's a council development, so the electricity cost, revenue cost from that electricity, which will be sold effectively to Welsh Water in this particular instance, obviously, and that money will obviously come back to the council. So obviously what we do with that isn't part of this planning application, that's a wider consideration. So if you like, there is a community benefit being derived through the council by actually selling renewable energy. So obviously there are wider benefits in terms of carbon offsetting, and obviously it contributes obviously to the wider aspiration to the council, obviously, to be net zero by a certain date. So that there is a community benefit, even though it may be a wider benefit rather than a particular local community benefit, if you like. In terms of Councillor Mary Jones's query about, so the connection, as I say, if you look at the connection, so obviously the red line has been extended not just to cover the access road into the site, but so what that allows to do is obviously we need to export the electricity from the site. So sometimes obviously there's a connection to the national grid system, which might be possible, I don't know as such, but in this particular case, what the red line and the private wire connection is trying to achieve there through the red line, it basically makes connection directly to the wastewater treatment site. So basically we are selling the electricity from the solar panels to Welsh Water directly. And in terms of the connection point, obviously it's a longer section of Fabian Way, but if you see the black line there, which basically goes under Fabian Way, that's basically it's still there actually, a railway line. So and basically it goes underneath Fabian Way. So there's basically Fabian Way is effectively a bridge. So the connection point actually goes underneath Fabian Way to allow that connection to the wastewater treatment works. So I hope those questions were answered. Yeah, sorry. Within the reports, obviously, there is a section which we've addressed that through ecology, and there has been widespread assessment through ecological assessments which are in the report. So yeah, that has been looked at certainly. And as I say, there are conditions covering that to seek ecological enhancement across the site as well and surrounding.
Cool, thank you very much. There's no other hands to speak? No. Okay, thank you, David. And then so we can Sorry? Yes, I was saying, the recommendation, as David said, is to approve. So we'll take that vote now then, please, Gareth.
Councillor Peter Black,
4.
Bill Downing,
Or
Mary Jones,
4,
Mike Lewis,
4,
Richard Lewis,
Oh, Chairman.
Nicola Matthews,
4.
Mark Tribe,
4.
Mike White,
4,
Andrew Williams,
4.
and Paul Lloyd.
Oh,
Unanimous.
Just
Chair, 10
carried.
for, none against.
it was carried unanimously. Thank you all very much. And we'll see you soon. And 4th of July, economy.
4th of July.
Thank you. What's significant about that?